The bullet that killed Sarah Finch had been meant for him, and that knowledge ate at Wyatt Finch every single day like a slow poison spreading through his veins. He stood on the porch of his ranch house outside Hachita, New Mexico territory, watching the sun paint the desert landscape in shades of copper and gold. 3 years had passed since that terrible day in 1883, when outlaws had ridden onto his property looking for revenge over a cattle dispute. Sarah had stepped in front of him, taking the shot that should have ended his life. The outlaws had fled when his ranch hands came running, but the damage was done. His wife of 5 years had died in his arms, her blood soaking into the dry earth of the land they had built together. Now it was 1886, and Wyatt existed rather than lived. He was 32 years old but felt ancient. The ranch still functioned because his foreman, Miguel Santos, was competent and loyal. The cattle were healthy, the buildings maintained, the finances sound. But Wyatt himself had become a ghost haunting his own property, going through the motions without feeling anything except the dull ache of guilt and grief. The sound of a wagon approaching made him turn. Through the settling dust of early evening, he could see an unfamiliar rig making its way up the long drive to his house. Visitors were rare out here, 15 miles from town. As the wagon drew closer, he could make out a woman driving, sitting straight-backed on the bench seat with the reins held confidently in her gloved hands. She pulled the horses to a stop in front of the house, and Wyatt found himself looking up at a woman he had never seen before. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with auburn hair pinned neatly beneath a sensible hat, and green eyes that assessed him with a directness that was almost unsettling. Her dress was practical for travel, a dark blue cotton that had seen some trail dust, but was well made and properly maintained. "Mr. Finch?" Her voice was clear and pleasant, with an accent that spoke of education somewhere back east. "That would be me," Wyatt said, not moving from his position against the porch railing. "What can I do for you? My name is Eleanor Richardson. I have traveled from Santa Fe with a proposition for you." She set the brake on the wagon and began to climb down without waiting for assistance. Wyatt did not move to help her, watching with detached curiosity as she gathered her skirts and descended with practiced ease. She was tall for a woman, he noticed, perhaps 5 feet 7 inches, and moved with confidence. "I do not entertain propositions from strangers," he said flatly. Eleanor reached the ground and brushed dust from her skirts before meeting his eyes directly. "I understand you have the finest cattle operation in this part of the territory. I have capital to invest and knowledge of markets in the East. I am looking to establish a partnership that would benefit us both financially." "Not interested." Wyatt turned to go back into the house. "Mr. Finch, I have traveled 3 days to speak with you. The least you could do is hear me out." "The least I could do is exactly what I am doing." "Good evening, Miss Richardson." He opened the door. "Mrs. Richardson, actually. I am a widow." Something in her voice made him pause, his hand on the door frame. He turned back slowly. Eleanor stood in the yard, the setting sun behind her, and there was steel in her spine but something else in her eyes. Something that looked like recognition of shared pain. "Then you should understand that some of us prefer to be left alone," Wyatt said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "I understand that grief can make us believe we want to be alone," Eleanor said quietly. "But wanting something and needing it are often 2 different things. You do not know anything about what I need. Perhaps not. But I do know that I have come a long way. My horses need water and rest, and night is falling. Whatever you think of my business proposition, surely you would not turn away a traveler in need of basic hospitality." Wyatt felt a flash of irritation. She had maneuvered him neatly into a corner. refusing to offer shelter to a woman alone as darkness fell went against every code he had been raised with, and she clearly knew it. "The barn is that way," he said, gesturing. "There is a pump for the horses. You can sleep in the tack room. My housekeeper will bring you something to eat." "Thank you," Eleanor said with a small smile. "That is very kind. It is not kindness. It is basic decency. Do not confuse the two." He went inside and closed the door, perhaps harder than necessary. Through the window, he watched Eleanor lead her team toward the barn with competent hands. Something about her irritated him profoundly, though he could not quite name what it was. Maybe it was the way she had looked at him, as if she could see past the walls he had built. Or maybe it was simply that she had disrupted his carefully maintained isolation. Maria Gonzalez, his housekeeper who came from town 3 times a week to cook and clean, appeared from the kitchen. She was a stout woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "We have a guest," she asked in Spanish, one eyebrow raised. "A woman with a business proposition." "She will sleep in the barn and be gone in the morning," Wyatt replied in the same language. Maria had been trying to get him to speak more since Sarah died, claiming it was unhealthy how silent he had become. "A woman alone in the barn. Senor Wyatt, you cannot do this." "I offered her the tack room. It is clean and dry." "It is a barn." Maria crossed her arms. "Your Sarah would be ashamed." The mention of Sarah's name was like a physical blow. "Do not," Wyatt said quietly, dangerously. But Maria had known him since he was a boy newly arrived in the territory, and she was not easily cowed. "The guest room sits empty. This woman can sleep there. I will prepare food for her." "Maria, I do not want her in the house." "Then you should not have invited her onto your property." "But she is here now, and we will treat her with proper respect." Maria turned back toward the kitchen, the matter clearly settled in her mind. Wyatt considered arguing further but knew it was pointless. When Maria made up her mind, that was the end of it. He poured himself a whiskey from the bottle he kept in the study. Sarah's study, really, where she had managed the ranch books. He had barely touched the room since her death, letting Miguel handle most of the paperwork. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. When he opened it, Eleanor stood there with her traveling bag, her hat removed to reveal hair that caught the lamplight like polished copper. "Your housekeeper insisted I should stay in the house," she said. "I do not wish to impose, but she was quite firm about it. Maria usually is." Wyatt stepped aside. "The guest room is upstairs, first door on the right. Supper will be ready shortly." "Thank you, Mr. Finch. I appreciate your hospitality." "Thank Maria. She is the one with manners." Eleanor smiled slightly at that, a real smile that touched her eyes and made her face transform from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. Wyatt looked away quickly, uncomfortable with the observation. He showed her upstairs in silence, pointing out the guest room and the washroom before retreating back downstairs. The house suddenly felt different with another person in it. Smaller, more alive. He did not like it. At supper, Maria set 3 places at the table. Wyatt normally ate alone in the kitchen, but tonight the housekeeper had set the dining room table with Sarah's good dishes, something that had not happened since the funeral. "This is not necessary," he told Maria in Spanish. "It is very necessary," she replied firmly. "You have been living like a hermit. It is not healthy." Eleanor appeared in the doorway, having changed into a fresh dress and repinned her hair. She looked rested despite her long journey, and Wyatt realized with some surprise that she was quite composed for a woman traveling alone through the territory. "Something smells wonderful," Eleanor said, taking the seat Maria indicated. The meal was chicken with rice and beans, fresh tortillas and vegetables from Maria's garden. For several minutes they ate in silence. Wyatt focused on his plate, hoping Eleanor would take the hint and keep quiet. "This is delicious," Eleanor said to Maria. "Thank you for your kindness." "De nada," Maria said warmly. "It is good to cook for more than one again. Senor Wyatt, he barely eats these days." "Maria," Wyatt said warningly, "it is true, you pick at your food like a bird. You have lost weight. You think I do not notice." Eleanor looked between them with interest, and Wyatt felt his irritation growing. "My eating habits are not a topic for discussion." "Someone should discuss them," Maria muttered, but she returned to the kitchen, leaving them alone. "She cares about you," Eleanor observed. "She is meddlesome." "The two are not mutually exclusive." Eleanor took a sip of water. "Mr. Finch, I know you said you are not interested in my proposition, but would you at least allow me to explain it? I have come a very long way." "Why me? There are other ranchers." "Because your operation is the most successful. Because you have a reputation for honest dealing. Because the quality of your cattle is superior to anything else in the region." She met his eyes. "Because I have done my research, and I do not waste my time on second-best options." Despite himself, Wyatt was slightly impressed by her directness. "What makes you think you know anything about cattle ranching?" "My late husband owned a freight company. We transported cattle from ranches to railheads throughout the West. I learned a great deal about the business, about what buyers want, about market prices and timing." Her voice was steady, businesslike. "After he died 2 years ago, I sold the freight company. I have capital and knowledge, but no product." "You have an excellent product, but, from what I understand, you have been letting opportunities slip past because you are no longer engaged with the expansion side of the business." Wyatt set down his fork. "You have been asking about me, of course. I told you I do my research." Eleanor broke off a piece of tortilla. "I am not asking for charity or sentiment, Mr. Finch. I am proposing a legitimate business partnership. You maintain the ranching operations. I handle the marketing and distribution. We split the profits according to a fair formula based on our respective investments and contributions. And why would I want a partner? I have been running this ranch just fine on my own." "Have you?" Eleanor's green eyes were penetrating. "Because from what I have heard, you have been maintaining, not growing. Your foreman handles the day-to-day operations while you withdraw further from the business that you and your wife built together." Wyatt felt his jaw tighten. "You know nothing about my wife or what we built." "You are right." "I apologize." Eleanor's voice softened. "That was presumptuous, but I am correct about the business, am I not? You are coasting on past success rather than building toward the future." She was right, and Wyatt hated that she was right. He had been doing exactly that, letting the ranch function on momentum while he retreated into his grief. But admitting it to this stranger felt like betrayal. "I will think about it," he heard himself say, surprising himself. Eleanor's face brightened. "Truly, I said I would think about it." "That is all. No promises." "That is more than I hoped for when you first greeted me." She smiled again, and again Wyatt had to look away from the warmth in her expression. "Thank you, Mr. Finch." "Wyatt, if you are going to be pestering me about business, you might as well use my given name." "Then you must call me Eleanor." He nodded once, curtly, and returned his attention to his meal. But he found himself watching her from the corner of his eye, noting the graceful way she moved, the intelligence in her face, the quiet strength she projected. She was nothing like Sarah, who had been small and blonde and gentle. Eleanor was tall and auburn-haired and had an edge of steel to her. Maybe that was why he found her presence less painful than he had expected. After supper, Eleanor excused herself to retire early, claiming exhaustion from the journey. Wyatt sat on the porch with another whiskey, listening to the night sounds of the desert. Coyotes singing in the distance, the rustle of small creatures in the brush, the occasional low of cattle from the pastures. Miguel approached from the bunkhouse, his footsteps quiet on the packed earth. The foreman was 10 years older than Wyatt, with a weathered face and steady hands. "The new woman," Miguel said without preamble. "She is staying. Just tonight, maybe tomorrow, she has some business idea." Miguel nodded, rolling a cigarette with practiced fingers. "Maria says she is a widow like you. Maria talks too much. Maria sees too much." Miguel lit the cigarette, the match flaring briefly in the darkness. "She worries about you, patron. We all do. There is no need. There is every need. You have been dying slowly for 3 years. We stand by and watch because we do not know what else to do." Miguel exhaled smoke. "Maybe this woman, maybe she is what you need. I do not need anything from her except for her to leave me in peace. Peace and loneliness are not the same thing, my friend." Wyatt did not respond, and after a moment, Miguel touched his hat and walked back toward the bunkhouse. Wyatt sat alone in the darkness, nursing his whiskey and trying not to think about green eyes and auburn hair, and a smile that had made something twist in his chest. He dreamed of Sarah that night, as he often did. But this time, in the dream, she was angry with him. She stood in a field of wildflowers, wearing the white dress she had married him in, and her face was disappointed. "You are wasting your life," Dream Sarah said. "You are wasting everything we built." "I am keeping the ranch going," he protested. "You are existing, not living." "There is a difference, Wyatt. You know there is a difference." He reached for her, but she stepped back, shaking her head. "I did not die so you could bury yourself alongside me. I died protecting the man I loved, the man who was full of life and dreams and hope. Where did that man go?" "He died with you." "No," Sarah's voice was firm. "He is still there, he is just hiding, he is just afraid." She began to fade, the flowers behind her growing brighter. "Let yourself live, Wyatt, let yourself live." He woke with a gasp, his heart pounding. The room was dark except for the faint moonlight coming through the window. For a moment, he could still smell wildflowers, could still see the disappointment in Sarah's eyes. Then reality settled back around him, cold and familiar. Morning came too early. Wyatt rose before dawn as always, dressed, and went down to the kitchen. To his surprise, Eleanor was already there, helping Maria prepare breakfast. "Good morning," Eleanor said brightly. She had her sleeves rolled up and was slicing bread with competent strokes. "I hope you do not mind." "I am an early riser, and I offered to help." Wyatt grunted something that might have been a greeting and poured himself coffee. He was not accustomed to conversation before the sun was fully up. "I thought I might stay a few more days, if that is acceptable," Eleanor continued. "To give you time to consider my proposal properly, and to show you that I am serious about understanding the operation. You want to work on the ranch. I want to learn it. I cannot propose a true partnership without understanding what you do here." She looked at him over the bread knife. "Unless you object," Wyatt should have objected, should have sent her on her way immediately. Instead, he heard himself saying, "Miguel can show you around. I have business in town today." That was a lie. He had no business in town. But the thought of spending the day with Eleanor, showing her the ranch he and Sarah had built, felt like more than he could handle. "Thank you," Eleanor said simply. He left as soon as breakfast was finished, saddling his horse and riding toward Hachita without a clear destination in mind. The town was small, just a scattering of buildings along the Southern Pacific Railroad line. A general store, a saloon, a hotel, a church, and a handful of houses. It existed primarily to serve the ranches in the area and the occasional traveler. Wyatt found himself at the church, standing in front of the small cemetery plot where Sarah was buried. He had not visited in months. The headstone was simple granite with her name, dates, and the words "beloved wife." "There is a woman at the house," he told the gravestone. She wants to be a business partner. She is persistent and intelligent and irritating. He paused. I dreamed about you last night. You told me I was wasting my life. The wind stirred dust around the headstone but provided no other answer. I do not know how to stop, Wyatt said quietly. I do not know how to move forward when moving forward means leaving you behind. He stayed there for an hour, sitting in the dust beside the grave, before finally mounting his horse and riding slowly back to the ranch. By the time he arrived, the sun was high overhead, and he could see Eleanor out by the main corral with Miguel, watching the hands work with some young horses. She had changed into a split riding skirt and a practical blouse, and her hair was braided down her back. She was listening intently to whatever Miguel was explaining, asking questions that Wyatt could not hear from this distance. As he watched, one of the young horses spooked and bolted toward the fence where Eleanor stood. She did not flinch, merely stepped aside calmly as the horse thundered past. Miguel saw Wyatt and waved him over. Reluctantly, Wyatt dismounted and walked to the corral. Your partner here has a good eye for horses, Miguel said with a grin. She spotted the problem with that paint before I did. I am not her partner, Wyatt said. Not yet, Eleanor added with a slight smile. The paint has an abscess in his right front hoof. He has been favoring it, but it is subtle. It needs to be drained and packed before it gets worse. Wyatt looked at the horse, then at Eleanor. How did you spot that? I told you, I worked with my husband in the freight business. You learn to read horses when your livelihood depends on them staying healthy enough to pull wagons. She shrugged. I may not know much about cattle yet, but I know horses. Despite himself, Wyatt was impressed. Miguel, get Thomas to handle that abscess. Already done, patron. Miguel's eyes were twinkling with amusement. Perhaps you should show Eleanor the south pasture. She wants to understand the grazing rotation. Wyatt wanted to refuse, but Eleanor was already looking at him expectantly, and he found himself nodding. Get your horse. They rode out together, Wyatt on his bay gelding and Eleanor on a gray mare from his stable. She rode well, sitting the horse with easy confidence and keeping pace with him across the rough terrain. Your foreman is a good man, Eleanor said as they rode. He clearly cares about this place. Miguel has been with me for 8 years. He was with me and Sarah from the beginning. It was the first time he had said Sarah's name to Eleanor, and something shifted in the air between them. Eleanor did not press, did not ask questions, just nodded acknowledgement and let the silence stretch. The south pasture was lush by desert standards, with good grass and several watering holes fed by underground springs. Cattle dotted the landscape, heavy-bodied Herefords that Sarah had convinced him to invest in 5 years ago. These are beautiful animals, Eleanor said, reining in to look across the herd. Good weight, healthy coats. You rotate them between pastures to prevent overgrazing. Every 6 weeks, we have 4 main pastures plus holding areas near the house for calving season and medical treatment. And you drive them to market when? Twice a year usually, spring and fall. We drive to the railhead at Deeming. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. Have you considered contracting with buyers who would come directly here, save you the drive expenses and weight loss? The drive is traditional. Traditional, but not necessarily the most profitable. Eleanor turned in her saddle to face him. Wyatt, I am not trying to change everything you have built, but there are opportunities you might be missing, small efficiencies that could add up to significant profit increases. Why do you care so much about this? Wyatt asked. You said you have capital from selling your husband's business. You could invest in anything. Why ranching? Why here? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, looking out across the pasture. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he had heard it before. Because after my husband died, I tried to go back east. I thought I would return to Philadelphia to the life I had before I married and came west. But I could not do it. That life did not fit anymore. She looked at him, and her green eyes were honest. I realized that the West had become my home, and I realized that I needed purpose, something to build, something to work toward. I am good at business, Wyatt. I am good at seeing opportunities and making connections. But I need a foundation to build on, and you have that foundation here. So this is about you finding purpose, Wyatt said flatly. Is that so different from what you are doing? Or rather, what you are not doing? Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. We are both trying to figure out how to live after loss. The difference is that I am trying to move forward while you are standing still. Anger flared in Wyatt's chest. You do not know anything about my loss. You are right. I do not know about Sarah, but I know about loss. I know what it feels like to have your future ripped away. I know what it feels like to wake up every morning and have to remember all over again that the person you love is gone. Her hands tightened on the reins. My husband was killed in a wagon accident 18 months ago. He was crushed when the load shifted going around a turn. He died instantly, they told me, as if that made it better. The pain in her voice was raw and real, and Wyatt felt his anger deflate. I am sorry. I am sorry, too, for both of us. Eleanor straightened in her saddle. But Edward would not have wanted me to stop living. He loved life too much for that. He would have wanted me to keep going, to keep building. And I think, if your Sarah was the woman I've heard about in town, she would want the same for you. What have you heard about Sarah? Wyatt's voice was sharp. That she was kind, that she was smart, that she loved this ranch and loved you, that she was trying to protect you when she died. Eleanor met his eyes. And I think a woman like that would be heartbroken to see you giving up on the life you built together. Wyatt turned his horse abruptly. We should head back. They rode in silence, but the words hung between them. That night, after Eleanor had retired and Maria had gone home, Wyatt sat in Sarah's study and really looked at it for the first time in years. Dust covered the desk. The ledgers were out of date. Papers were stacked haphazardly, many of them unopened correspondence from potential buyers and suppliers. He opened one of the letters at random. It was from a buyer in Kansas City, dated 6 months ago, proposing a very favorable contract for regular shipments of beef. Wyatt had never even read it. He opened another and another. Opportunities, connections, possibilities, all ignored because he had been too buried in his grief to see them. Dreams, Sarah's voice echoed in his mind. You are wasting everything we built. He spent the next 3 hours going through the papers, sorting them into piles, making notes. When he finally went to bed well after midnight, his mind was churning with thoughts of business possibilities and market strategies, and a persistent woman with green eyes who saw through his walls. Over the next week, Eleanor stayed at the ranch. She made herself useful without being intrusive, helping Maria with household tasks, working with Miguel to understand the ranch operations, and carefully not pushing Wyatt about the partnership proposal. Instead, she simply showed him through her actions that she was serious, capable, and willing to work. Wyatt found himself watching her. The way she moved through the ranch with growing confidence, the way she laughed at Miguel's jokes, the way she sat on the porch in the evenings, reading or mending, content in the silence. She did not demand conversation or attention, but her presence was becoming familiar, comfortable, even. One afternoon, Wyatt found her in the barn, helping one of the younger ranch hands, Thomas, with a difficult foaling. The mare was struggling, and Eleanor had her sleeves rolled up, speaking soothingly to the horse while guiding Thomas through the process. Easy, Mama, Eleanor murmured to the mare. You are doing so well, just a little more now. The foal came in a rush, landing in the straw with a wet thump. Eleanor and Thomas worked quickly to clear its airways and stimulate breathing. After a tense moment, the foal drew a shuddering breath and began to move. "There you go," Eleanor said with satisfaction, sitting back on her heels. She was covered in blood and fluid, her hair coming loose from its pins, and she was grinning with pure joy. "Welcome to the world, little one." Thomas was looking at her with something like hero worship. "Miss Eleanor, you saved him. I could not have done that alone." "Of course you could have. You just needed someone to steady your nerves." Eleanor patted his shoulder. "You did the hard part." She stood, catching sight of Wyatt in the doorway. "Oh, hello, we have a new addition." "I saw." Wyatt looked at the foal, now attempting to stand on shaky legs. "That was well done. I have brought my share of animals into the world." Eleanor looked down at her ruined dress with a rueful smile. "Though I seem to have brought most of the afterbirth with me, I should go clean up." As she passed him in the doorway, Wyatt caught her arm gently. "Eleanor, thank you for helping Thomas, for helping around here." She looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. Something passed between them, a moment of connection that made Wyatt's breath catch. Eleanor's eyes were very green, her face still flushed from exertion, and she was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with her features and everything to do with the life and purpose radiating from her. "You are welcome," she said softly. Wyatt released her arm and stepped back, suddenly aware of the impropriety of touching her. "I will have Maria heat water for a bath." That evening, after Eleanor had bathed and changed, she found Wyatt in Sarah's study. He was working through the correspondence, making lists, and barely looked up when she knocked on the open door. "Am I interrupting?" she asked. "No, come in." Wyatt gestured to a chair. "I have been going through these letters. There are some interesting opportunities here." Eleanor sat, smoothing her skirt. "May I look?" He handed her several letters, and she read them carefully, her expression thoughtful. "These are very good offers, this one from Kansas City especially. Why did you not respond?" "I did not open them." Wyatt met her eyes. "I have not been in this room since Sarah died. I have been letting Miguel handle the paperwork, but he focuses on day-to-day operations, not expansion." "Oh, Wyatt." Eleanor's voice was compassionate but not pitying. "May I ask what happened?" "I know she died protecting you, but I do not know the details." Wyatt was quiet for a long moment. He had not talked about that day with anyone except the sheriff. But looking at Eleanor, seeing the understanding in her face, he found the words coming. "There was a dispute over grazing land with a neighboring rancher. It got ugly. He sold out and left the territory, but some of his former hands blamed me for them losing their jobs. 3 of them came here looking for revenge." Wyatt's voice was steady, but his hands clenched on the desk. "Sarah and I were outside. I saw them coming, saw the guns. I pushed Sarah toward the house, but she circled back. When one of them aimed at me, she stepped in front. The bullet caught her in the chest." Eleanor's hand went to her mouth. "Wyatt." "Miguel and the boys heard the shot and came running. The outlaws fled. We never caught them." Wyatt looked at his hands. "She died within minutes. She told me she loved me. She told me not to waste my life, and then she was gone." "And you have been wasting it anyway," Eleanor said quietly. "I have been trying not to. I have been trying to keep the ranch going, to honor what we built, but you are right. I have just been maintaining, not living." He looked at Eleanor. "I think I have been punishing myself. If I keep suffering, keep denying myself any pleasure or growth, maybe that makes up for the fact that I am alive and she is not." "It does not work that way," Eleanor said. "Believe me, I tried the same thing after Edward died. I tried to make myself small, to stop wanting anything, to just exist. But it does not honor them. It just wastes the life they would want us to live. How did you stop?" "I made a choice. I woke up one morning and decided that I could either let grief define the rest of my life, or I could carry Edward with me while still moving forward. Eleanor leaned forward. Grief does not have to be left behind, Wyatt. It can come with us. Sarah does not have to be in the past for you to have a future. Wyatt felt something shift in his chest, like a door that had been locked tight suddenly cracking open. I do not know how to do that. Neither do I, entirely. But I think we figure it out one day at a time. Eleanor smiled. And maybe, just maybe, we help each other figure it out. Is that what this partnership is really about? Wyatt asked. Helping each other heal. That is part of it. The business side is real too. I meant everything I said about wanting to invest and build something. Eleanor met his eyes. But yes, I also think we could be good for each other. We understand what the other has lost. We do not have to pretend to be over it or past it. Wyatt stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening landscape. I should have sent you away that first day. Why did you not? I do not know. Maybe because you did not look at me with pity. Maybe because you made me angry, and anger was the first real emotion I had felt in years. He turned back to face her. Maybe because some part of me recognized that you were a chance I could not afford to miss. Eleanor stood, smoothing her skirts. So what do you say, Wyatt Finch? Do we have a partnership? We have a partnership, Wyatt said, but I have conditions. Name them. You stay here at the ranch. There is no point in you riding back and forth from town, and we will need to work closely to integrate your market knowledge with the operations. He saw her eyes widen slightly. With proper chaperone, of course. Maria can move into one of the spare rooms. Everything above board. Agreed. What else? You teach me everything you know about Eastern markets and distribution. I teach you everything about ranching. We make decisions together, but on operational matters I have final say. On business and marketing matters you have final say. Eleanor considered this, then nodded. That seems fair. Anything else? We take it slow. I am not ready to make major changes overnight. You have patience while I learn to engage with the business again. Of course. Eleanor extended her hand. Partners. Wyatt took her hand, feeling the calluses on her palm, the strength in her grip. Partners. Over the following weeks, the ranch began to transform. Eleanor's presence brought new energy to the operation. She spent her mornings working with Miguel and the hands, learning every aspect of the ranching process. Afternoons, she and Wyatt worked together in the study, going through correspondence, developing business strategies, planning for the future. She wrote letters to contacts in Kansas City, Chicago, and Philadelphia. She developed a pricing strategy based on market fluctuations. She proposed improvements to the ranch infrastructure that would increase efficiency. And through it all, she was patient with Wyatt's grief, never pushing him faster than he could go. Wyatt found himself coming alive again in ways he had not expected. The work gave him purpose beyond mere survival. Eleanor's questions forced him to articulate the knowledge he had accumulated, to really think about what he was doing and why. And her presence, her laughter, her quick mind, made the house feel like a home again instead of a mausoleum. Maria watched the developing relationship with satisfaction, making sure to always be present as chaperone but giving them space to work together. She had moved into the spare room as promised, and her presence meant there could be no question of impropriety. One evening in early November, nearly 2 months after Eleanor's arrival, Wyatt found her on the porch watching the sunset. She had become a fixture there, often sitting in the evenings with a cup of coffee and a book. He had started joining her, at first sporadically, then more regularly. We got a response from the Kansas City buyer, Wyatt said, settling into the chair beside her. He wants to send a representative to inspect the herd and discuss terms. That is wonderful, Eleanor's face lit up. When? 3 weeks. That gives us time to prepare. Wyatt looked at her. This was your doing. You made this happen. We made it happen. I just opened the door. You are the one with the quality product. Eleanor set down her book. How do you feel about it? Nervous, excited, afraid I will disappoint you. You could never disappoint me, Wyatt. The sincerity in her voice made something warm bloom in Wyatt's chest. I have been thinking, he said slowly, about what you said, about carrying grief with us instead of being buried by it. I think I am starting to understand what you meant. Tell me. I will always love Sarah. She will always be part of who I am. But loving her does not mean I have to stop living. She would not have wanted that. Wyatt looked at Eleanor, really looked at her, taking in the way the sunset painted her hair with fire, the intelligence in her eyes, the strength in her bearing. And I think she would have liked you. Eleanor smiled, soft and genuine. I would have liked her too. Anyone you loved that deeply must have been extraordinary. She was, but so are you. The words came out before Wyatt could stop them, and he saw Eleanor's eyes widen. I mean, you are an extraordinary businesswoman. Your knowledge is invaluable. Of course, Eleanor said, but there was a hint of something else in her voice. Disappointment, hope. Wyatt could not quite rate it. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon. Wyatt was acutely aware of Eleanor beside him, the small space between their chairs feeling both vast and insignificant. He wanted to reach out to take her hand, but he was not sure if he had the right, not sure if it would be betraying Sarah's memory. As if reading his thoughts, Eleanor said quietly, Loving again does not erase the love that came before, Wyatt. The heart does not have a finite capacity. It can hold multiple loves, past and present, without diminishing either. Is that what is happening? Wyatt asked, his voice rough. Are we falling in love? Eleanor turned to look at him, and in her eyes he saw honesty and vulnerability. I think we might be, if we let ourselves. I do not know if I know how anymore. Neither do I, but maybe we can figure it out together. She held out her hand, palm up, an invitation, not a demand. Wyatt looked at her hand for a long moment. This was a choice point, he realized. He could pull back, retreat into his grief and safety. Or he could take a risk, reach for the possibility of something new while honoring what had been. He placed his hand in hers, feeling her fingers close around his. It felt right in a way that both comforted and terrified him. Together, he said. They sat there as darkness fell, hands linked, neither speaking but both feeling the shift between them. Something had changed. Some barrier had been crossed, and there was no going back. The next few weeks were a dance of growing intimacy. Wyatt and Eleanor worked side by side during the days, their partnership deepening as they prepared for the buyer's visit. But there were also stolen moments. Hands brushing as they reached for the same ledger. Long looks across the dinner table. Conversations that stretched late into the night, covering everything from childhood memories to hopes for the future. Wyatt told her about growing up in Texas, about coming to New Mexico territory as a young man seeking his fortune, about meeting Sarah at a church social, about building the ranch from nothing. Eleanor told him about her privileged upbringing in Philadelphia, about scandalizing her family by marrying a freight company owner and heading west, about learning to love the wild spaces and big skies. They discovered shared tastes in books, similar senses of humor, compatible visions for what the ranch could become. But more than that, they discovered a deep compatibility of spirit. Both were stronger than they appeared. Both valued loyalty and honesty. Both had learned that life could be cruel, but were determined not to let that cruelty define them. Miguel watched their growing closeness with approval. "She is good for you, patron," he told Wyatt one morning as they worked on repairing a fence line. "You are becoming yourself again." "Am I that different, like night and day? When she first arrived, you were a ghost. Now you are a man again." Miguel hammered in a fence post with strong strikes. "You're Sarah, she would be happy to see it. You think so, I know so. Senora Sarah, she loved you too much to want you to die inside." Miguel straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead. "And Miss Eleanor, she is not trying to replace Senora Sarah. She is just being herself. That is good. You do not need a replacement, you need a new chapter." "When did you become so wise?" Miguel grinned. "I have always been wise. You have just been too stubborn to listen." The representative from Kansas City arrived on a cold November day. His name was Harold Morrison, and he was a no-nonsense businessman who spent 3 days inspecting the herd, reviewing the books, and asking detailed questions. Eleanor handled him with impressive skill, matching his businesslike demeanor while subtly highlighting the advantages of partnering with Finch Ranch. On the final evening of his visit, Morrison made his offer over dinner. It was generous, better than Wyatt had expected. A contract for regular shipments at premium prices, with the buyer handling transportation costs. "This is an excellent operation," Morrison said, cutting into his steak. "The quality of your cattle is exceptional, Mr. Finch. And Mrs. Richardson, your business acumen is impressive. I think this could be the beginning of a very profitable relationship." After Morrison retired for the evening, Wyatt and Eleanor went over the contract terms in the study. They sat close together at the desk, shoulders almost touching, reviewing each clause. "This is incredible," Wyatt said. "This contract alone will increase our annual revenue by 30%. And it is just the beginning. Once word spreads about the quality of your cattle, we will have more buyers competing for contracts." Eleanor looked at him, her eyes bright with excitement. "Wyatt, this is really happening. We are building something real here." "We are." He reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was intimate, familiar, and Eleanor's breath caught. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you." "I have been trying not to, telling myself it was too soon, that I was not ready, but I cannot deny it anymore." Wyatt cupped her face gently. "You have brought me back to life. You have given me hope and purpose and joy, and I do not want to hide from that anymore." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I love you too. I have been falling for you since the day you grudgingly let me stay in your barn." Wyatt laughed, a real laugh that felt rusty from disuse but wonderful. "I was not that bad. You were terrible. Grumpy and closed off and determined to push me away." Eleanor placed her hand over his on her cheek. "But I saw through it. I saw the good man underneath, the man who was drowning in grief but still had kindness in him. And I knew that if I could just be patient, just show you that it was safe to feel again, you would find your way back. You are stubborn. So are you. We match." Wyatt leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Eleanor met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it was like coming home and discovering somewhere new all at the same time. The kiss was gentle, tentative, full of promise and possibility. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Wyatt rested his forehead against Eleanor's, his hand still cupping her face. "I still love Sarah," he said quietly. "I always will, I know. And I will always love Edward. That is okay. We do not have to forget them to move forward." Eleanor kissed him again, soft and sweet. "We can honor what we had while building something new." From that night forward, their relationship shifted from partnership to courtship. With Maria as ever-present chaperone, Wyatt and Eleanor spent their evenings together, talking and laughing and slowly building intimacy. They took rides across the ranch, Wyatt showing her every corner of the land he loved. They worked together seamlessly, their business partnership and romantic relationship intertwining naturally. December brought the first real cold, and with it, preparations for the first shipment to Kansas City. The hands worked to select the best cattle, to prepare them for transport. Eleanor coordinated with the buyer's representatives, ensuring every detail was handled properly. Wyatt supervised the operational side, trusting Eleanor to manage the business aspects. On Christmas Eve, the ranch was quiet. Most of the hands had gone into town for the holiday. Maria had returned to her family. For the first time since Eleanor's arrival, Wyatt and Eleanor were truly alone in the house. They sat by the fire in the living room, drinking coffee and watching the flames. Snow was falling outside, rare for Hachita but beautiful. The house was decorated simply. Eleanor had insisted on a small tree strung with popcorn and paper ornaments that she and Maria had made. "I have something for you," Wyatt said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small wrapped package and handed it to Eleanor. She opened it carefully, revealing a delicate silver bracelet inlaid with turquoise. "Wyatt, it is beautiful." "It was Sarah's," he said quietly. "She bought it from a Navajo trader the year before she died. I want you to have it." Eleanor looked at him with wide eyes. "Are you sure? This is precious to you, I am sure. Sarah would want someone to wear it, to love it, and I think she would want that person to be you." Wyatt took the bracelet and fastened it around Eleanor's wrist. "You are not replacing her, Eleanor. You are writing a new chapter, but that does not mean we forget the previous chapters. They are all part of the story." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for trusting me with this, for trusting me with your heart. I have something else too." Wyatt stood and walked to the mantel, taking down a small box that he had hidden there earlier. He returned to Eleanor and, to her shock, knelt in front of her chair. "Eleanor Richardson, you came into my life when I was broken and convinced I would never be whole again. You were patient and persistent and brave enough to push past my walls. You have given me hope and purpose and love. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a small diamond. It was not extravagant, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. Eleanor was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, of course, yes." Wyatt slipped the ring onto her finger and Eleanor pulled him up to kiss him. The kiss was deep and full of promise, tasting of salt from her tears and the coffee they had been drinking. "I love you," Eleanor whispered against his lips. "I love you so much. I love you too." Wyatt held her close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. "You have saved me, Eleanor. In every way that matters, you have saved me." They sat together by the fire, wrapped in each other's arms, planning their future. They would marry in the spring, Eleanor decided. A simple ceremony at the church in Hachita, with Miguel and Maria and the ranch hands in attendance. They would honeymoon at the ranch, both of them too invested in the business to go far. And they would continue to build, both the ranch and their life together. The wedding took place on a beautiful day in April 1887. The church was decorated with wildflowers that Eleanor and Maria had gathered from the desert. Miguel stood up as Wyatt's best man. Maria cried happy tears throughout the ceremony. The small congregation of ranch hands, townspeople, and friends celebrated the union of two people who had found each other in grief and chosen to build joy together. Eleanor wore a simple cream dress, practically made but beautiful. Wyatt wore his best suit, nervous as a young boy but with a smile that had been absent for too long. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Wyatt kissed Eleanor with a tenderness that made Maria cry even harder. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with food and music and dancing. Miguel played guitar, and some of the hands joined in with harmonica and fiddle. Wyatt danced with his new wife under the stars, holding her close and marveling at how life could surprise you. "Happy?" Eleanor asked, her head resting on his shoulder as they swayed to the music. Happier than I thought I could be again, Wyatt admitted. You have given me back my life, Eleanor. We gave each other back our lives, she corrected. That is what love does. It heals and builds and creates something new from the broken pieces. Their first year of marriage was filled with hard work and deep happiness. The Kansas City contract proved even more successful than anticipated, leading to additional contracts with buyers in Chicago and St. Louis. The ranch expanded, with new pastures and improved facilities. Eleanor's business savvy combined with Wyatt's operational expertise made them formidable partners. But more than the business success, it was the personal joy that defined their days. Wyatt found himself laughing regularly, something that had seemed impossible just a year before. Eleanor bloomed in the desert landscape, her confidence growing as she proved herself not just as a businesswoman but as a rancher. She could handle a horse as well as any of the hands, could assist with foaling and calving, could read weather patterns and make operational decisions. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch together, sometimes talking, sometimes sitting in comfortable silence. Wyatt would tell her stories about Sarah, keeping those memories alive. Eleanor would share memories of Edward. They wove their past loves into their present, honoring what had been while celebrating what was. In the fall of 1887, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror. Wyatt worried about losing her the way he had lost Sarah. Eleanor worried about bringing a child into a harsh world, but together they worked through their fears, supporting each other through the pregnancy. Maria fussed over Eleanor constantly, making sure she rested and ate properly. Miguel and the hands treated her like precious china, despite her protests that she was perfectly capable of continuing to work. Wyatt was attentive and protective, making sure she did not overdo it while respecting her need to stay involved in the ranch operations. On a warm day in May 1888, Eleanor gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Edward Wyatt Finch, honoring both of their late spouses. The baby had his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair, and when Wyatt held his son for the first time, he wept with a mixture of joy and grief and overwhelming love. "He is perfect," Eleanor said weakly from the bed, exhausted but glowing. "Our little miracle." "Thank you," Wyatt said, sitting beside her with the baby in his arms. "Thank you for this gift, for all the gifts you have given me." Over the next few years, the Finch Ranch continued to thrive. Young Edward grew into a bright, curious child who loved the ranch and everything about it. In 1890, Eleanor gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Eleanor, another perfect blend of both parents. And in 1893, another son arrived, Robert Miguel, named for Eleanor's father and their loyal foreman. The house that had been silent for so long rang with children's laughter. The land that Wyatt had built with his first wife now flourished under the partnership with his second. The business that Eleanor had proposed that first day grew beyond either of their initial dreams, making Finch Ranch one of the most successful operations in New Mexico territory. Miguel remained foreman, watching the children grow with the pride of an honorary grandfather. Maria became the children's beloved Tia Maria, spoiling them and teaching them Spanish and making sure they knew their manners. The ranch hands came and went over the years, but a core group remained, loyal to Wyatt and Eleanor and the family they had built. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1897, Wyatt and Eleanor rode out to the south pasture together, leaving the children in Maria's capable care. They sat on a blanket under the wide New Mexico sky, drinking wine and watching the sunset paint the desert in brilliant colors. "You ever regret it?" Wyatt asked, taking Eleanor's hand. "Giving up the possibility of a comfortable life back east to partner with a broken rancher?" Eleanor laughed, the sound full and joyful. Not for a single moment. This life, this ranch, you, our children, this is everything I never knew I wanted. I was so determined to push you away that first day. I know, you were terrible. Eleanor leaned against him. But I saw past the grief and anger. I saw the man you could be again if you just let yourself heal, and I am so glad I was stubborn enough to stay. Persistent, Wyatt corrected with a smile. You prefer persistent, remember, persistent then. She kissed him softly. And you were worth every bit of persistence. They sat together as the sun sank lower, talking about the children, about plans for the ranch, about everything and nothing. The years had been kind to them both. Wyatt's face bore lines of laughter now instead of just grief. Eleanor's hands were calloused from ranch work but strong and capable. They had built a life together that honored their pasts while embracing their future. I still think about Sarah sometimes, Wyatt said quietly. I still miss her, I know, and I still miss Edward. But I like to think they would be happy for us, that they would approve of what we have built together. I think they would. I think Sarah would have liked you very much. You are both stubborn and strong and unwilling to let me wallow in self-pity. Eleanor laughed. Someone had to save you from yourself. You did save me. You and your ridiculous business proposition that was never really just about business. Was it that obvious? In retrospect, yes. You could have invested anywhere with anyone. But you chose a grieving widower on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. Wyatt pulled her closer. You chose me when I could not choose myself. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. As darkness fell, they rode back to the ranch house together. Lights glowed in the windows, and they could hear the children's voices raised in some game or argument. Maria would be making dinner, filling the house with wonderful smells. Miguel would probably stop by after checking on the evening chores, sharing a drink and conversation. This was home. This was family. This was the life that Wyatt had thought was over when Sarah died, and this was the life that Eleanor had helped him build from the ashes of his grief. They had proven that love could bloom even in the hardest soil, that broken hearts could heal and love again, that the past and present could coexist, honoring what was while celebrating what is. And that sometimes, the person who saves you is the one brave enough to see past your brokenness to the whole person waiting underneath. Years continued to pass in contentment and purpose. Edward, their eldest, grew into a serious young man who loved the cattle business and showed a keen mind for the operational side of ranching. Sarah became a skilled horsewoman with her mother's business acumen. Young Robert was the wild one, always getting into scrapes but with a heart as big as the territory itself. By 1900, Finch Ranch was legendary throughout New Mexico. The Finch name was synonymous with quality cattle and fair dealing. Wyatt and Eleanor had become pillars of the community, their success story whispered about in admiring tones. The persistent widow from the East who had courted the broken rancher, and the love they had built from mutual grief and understanding. Miguel retired in 1902, though he continued to live on the ranch in a small house Wyatt built for him. Thomas, the young hand Eleanor had helped with the difficult foaling all those years ago, took over as foreman. He was a capable man who had learned from the best, and the ranch continued to thrive under his management. As Wyatt and Eleanor entered their later years, they spent more time on the porch they both loved, watching sunsets and talking about their blessings. Their children were grown and starting families of their own. Edward had married a rancher's daughter from Deeming and already had 2 children. Sarah had married a businessman from Santa Fe who appreciated her sharp mind. Robert was courting the new schoolteacher in town, much to Maria's delight. "We have built something lasting," Eleanor said one evening, her hair now threaded with silver but her green eyes still as bright as ever. Something that will outlive us. We have, Wyatt agreed. His own hair was more gray than dark now, but he was still strong, still capable. Though I prefer to focus on the living part rather than the outliving part. Eleanor laughed. Always the optimist now. What happened to the grim, broken man I met all those years ago? You happened to him. You refused to let him stay broken. Wyatt took her hand, his thumb rubbing over the silver bracelet she still wore every day. You were the most persistent, annoying, wonderful thing that ever happened to me. I love you too, Eleanor said dryly, but she was smiling. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the desert landscape they both loved. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear cattle lowing. Closer by, the sound of ranch hands finishing evening chores. The rhythm of the ranch, the heartbeat that had sustained them for so many years. Do you think we made the right choices? Wyatt asked. Looking back on everything, would you change anything? Eleanor considered the question seriously. I would not change meeting you. I would not change our children or this life. I wish Edward had not died, of course. I wish you had not lost Sarah the way you did. But those tragedies led us to each other, and I cannot regret that. Neither can I. As much as I loved Sarah, as much as I will always love her, I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You completed something in me that I did not know was incomplete. We saved each other, Eleanor said simply. That is what love does when it is real. It sees the broken pieces and helps put them back together, not the same way they were before, but in a new pattern that is just as beautiful. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Wyatt and Eleanor remained on the porch, holding hands and counting their blessings. 3 healthy children, a thriving ranch, a community that respected them, and most importantly, each other. They had built a legacy together that would continue long after they were gone. The ranch would pass to their children, who would add their own chapters to the story. The land would continue to sustain future generations of the Finch family. And the love story of the persistent woman and the broken rancher would be told and retold, a reminder that it is never too late to heal, never too late to love again, never too late to build something beautiful from the ruins of grief. In 1910, on a clear spring day much like the one when they had married, Wyatt and Eleanor celebrated their 23rd wedding anniversary. All 3 children had returned to the ranch with their families, filling the house with grandchildren and laughter. Maria, now quite elderly but still sharp as a tack, had supervised the preparation of a feast. Miguel, walking with a cane but still present, had offered a touching toast to the couple who had shown him what true love looked like. As the celebration wound down and the grandchildren were put to bed, Wyatt and Eleanor found themselves alone on their beloved porch once more. The night was warm, the stars brilliant in the clear desert air. 23 years, Eleanor mused. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I drove up to this house in my wagon, determined to convince you to partner with me. You were so persistent, so sure of yourself. I wanted to hate you for disrupting my comfortable misery. But you did not hate me. No, I could not. Even when I tried, even when I wanted to push you away, something in me recognized that you were exactly what I needed. Wyatt stood and pulled Eleanor to her feet. Dance with me. There is no music. We do not need music. They swayed together in the starlight, moving to a rhythm only they could hear. The rhythm of shared years and mutual understanding, of love built on the foundation of loss but growing into something entirely their own. I love you, Eleanor Finch, Wyatt whispered into her hair. Thank you for being persistent. Thank you for not giving up on me. I love you, Wyatt Finch, Eleanor replied. Thank you for letting me in. Thank you for showing me that broken things can be made whole again. They danced until the moon rose high. then went inside together to the home they had built, the life they had created, the love they had fought for and won. Two people who had known the depths of grief had found their way to the heights of joy, proving that the human heart is resilient beyond measure, and that love, when it is true and persistent and brave, can overcome even the darkest valleys. The legacy of Wyatt and Eleanor Finch lived on long after their time. Their children told their children about the grandmother who had arrived at the ranch with a business proposition and a heart full of determination, and the grandfather who had been too broken to see the gift she was offering until she refused to let him look away. About how persistence and patience had won the day, how love had bloomed in unexpected soil, how two wounded souls had healed each other and built something lasting. The ranch continued to thrive through generations, always bearing the Finch name, always embodying the values of hard work, fair dealing, and the courage to love even after loss. And on quiet evenings, when the desert wind whispered through the sage and the stars blazed overhead, those who lived on the land could almost hear the echo of laughter from the porch, the ghostly sound of two people who had found each other against all odds and refused to let grief define their story. It was a testament to the power of persistence, the resilience of the human heart, and the transformative nature of love that sees past the broken surface to the whole person waiting underneath. Wyatt had believed he was too damaged to love again, too consumed by guilt and grief to ever feel joy. Eleanor had proven him wrong, not through force but through steady presence, not through demands but through partnership, not through trying to erase his past but through honoring it while building a future together. In the end, that was their greatest achievement. Not the successful ranch or the financial legacy, or even the children and grandchildren they loved. It was the proof that healing is possible, that love can bloom more than once, that the end of one chapter does not mean the story is over. They had written a new chapter together, one filled with purpose and partnership, and a love that honored all that had come before while celebrating all that could be. And as the years turned into decades and the Finch Ranch became woven into the fabric of New Mexico history, their story remained at its heart. A reminder that sometimes the greatest courage is not in protecting your broken heart, but in daring to open it again. That sometimes the greatest gift is not in grand gestures but in persistent presence. And that sometimes the person who saves you is the one who refuses to accept that you are beyond saving, who sees the potential for wholeness even when you have given up on it yourself. Wyatt and Eleanor Finch lived out their days surrounded by love and purpose. Their twilight years as golden as the desert sunsets, they watched together. When Wyatt passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, with Eleanor holding his hand, his last words were of gratitude for the unexpected second chance at happiness she had given him. Eleanor followed him 3 years later, having lived to see her great-grandchildren born, and the ranch she had helped build continuing to flourish. They were buried side by side in the small cemetery in Hatchita, their headstone simple but meaningful. On one side was inscribed Sarah's name and dates, honoring Wyatt's first love. On the other side, eventually, Eleanor's name and dates were added. And in the center, the words that summed up their story: love persists, because that was the truth they had lived. Love persists through grief. It persists through fear and doubt. It persists when we are convinced we are too broken to deserve it, and when we are brave enough to accept it, persistent enough to fight for it, and wise enough to honor both past and present. Love can create miracles. The story of Wyatt and Eleanor Finch became legend in New Mexico territory and later the state of New Mexico. It was told around dinner tables and campfires, shared by parents with children, used as an example of how life's tragedies do not have to define us. How two people, each carrying the weight of loss, had found each other and built something beautiful from their shared understanding of grief and their mutual determination to live fully despite it. Their descendants continued to run the ranch for generations, each adding their own chapter to the ongoing story. But always, the foundation remained the same, the values of hard work and integrity that Wyatt had embodied, the business acumen and persistence that Eleanor had contributed. And above all, the belief that love is worth fighting for, worth building on, worth opening your heart to even when that heart has been broken before. The ranch itself became a symbol of resilience and renewal. The land that had witnessed tragedy when Sarah died had also witnessed the slow healing of a broken man and the determination of a persistent woman. It had seen love bloom again, had nurtured a new family, had provided the foundation for a legacy that would touch countless lives. Visitors to Hachita, when learning the history of the famous Finch Ranch, would often ask about the love story at its heart. And those who knew the tale would smile and tell of how a widow with a business proposition had arrived on a grieving rancher's doorstep and refused to accept his brokenness as permanent. How she had been patient and persistent and brave enough to push past his walls. How she had seen the man he could be again if he just allowed himself to heal. And they would tell how Wyatt, convinced he was beyond repair, had slowly come back to life under Eleanor's steady presence. How he had learned that loving again did not mean forgetting what came before. How he had discovered that the heart's capacity for love is infinite, not finite, and that honoring the past and embracing the future are not mutually exclusive. It was a story of hope in the face of despair, of choosing life even after death has taken someone you love, of the courage it takes to be vulnerable again after being devastated, of persistence overcoming resistance, patience outlasting grief, and love ultimately prevailing over loss. And it was true. Every word of it. The persistent woman and the broken rancher had found each other, had healed each other, had built a life together that honored their pasts while celebrating their present. They had proven that it is never too late, never too broken, never too damaged to love again if you are brave enough to try. That was the legacy of Wyatt and Eleanor Finch, not just a successful ranch or a large family or financial prosperity, though they had achieved all of those things. Their true legacy was the proof that the human spirit is resilient, that love can bloom in the hardest soil, and that sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply allowing yourself to hope again. As the 20th century progressed and the Wild West era faded into history, the Finch Ranch remained, a living testament to the enduring power of love and partnership. The land continued to produce. The cattle continued to thrive. The family continued to grow. And the story of how it all began, with a persistent woman and a broken rancher finding healing in each other, continued to inspire all who heard it. In the end, Eleanor had been right all those years ago on the porch. Wanting something and needing it are often two different things. Wyatt had wanted to be left alone in his grief. But what he had needed was exactly what Eleanor had offered: partnership, patience, and the persistent belief that he was not beyond saving. She had proven him wrong in the best possible way, showing him that broken things can be made whole, that hearts can heal and love again, and that sometimes the second chapter of your life can be just as beautiful as the first, just different. And that difference, that willingness to embrace a new love while honoring the old, to write a new chapter while remembering the previous ones, to move forward while carrying the past with gentle hands, that was what had made their love story one for the ages. A reminder to everyone who heard it that persistence and courage and opening your heart to possibility can lead to miracles, even in the harsh and unforgiving landscape of the desert, even in the wake of devastating loss, even when you are convinced you are too broken to ever be whole again.